Yo, what is up, movie fans? My name is Andrew, aka Noezone, and today I'm going to be giving y'all my best and worst movies of 2024. And now that 2024 has come to an end a few days ago, I just gotta say that for me personally, this year was not a great year for movies. And I don't know how the rest of y'all are feeling, but when I was comparing my 2024 letterbox to my 2023 letterbox, it was not even a contest. 2023 blew it out of the water. And that's not to say that no good movies came out this year, but there were some stinkers, so we'll get into those later. And the rankings that I'm going to be giving y'all in this video today are going to be my top 5 most surprising, my top 5 most disappointing, my top 10 best, and my top 5 worst movies of 2024. So basically, I got a lot of movies to cover with y'all today in this video, but before we get into that, consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel if you like more content like this. But without any further ado, let's get into these rankings.
Surprise, Sydney.
So coming in at number 5 for my most surprising movies of 2024, I gotta go with Smile 2. After watching the first movie for the first time this year and lead up to this, I just thought that movie was decent. It still exceeded my expectations because I thought it was going to be absolute garbage. But the first Smile movie creates a great atmosphere, has some good jump scares, but it's just a wildly unoriginal movie. So my mindset going into Smile 2 was that I was going to get more of the same, but it just blew my expectations out of the water with the amount of just adrenaline pumped into this movie, especially when you get to the third act. Naomi Scott gives an Oscar-worthy performance that will never get recognized by them. The ending of this movie sets up Smile 3 to be a really big, grand scale horror movie, so it got me looking forward to the future unlike the first one. My only complaint with Smile 2 is more of a complaint of just like the concept of this franchise, and it's that while I've been won over to the concept of like the smiling, basically copying Truth or Dare, but they made it better, I just don't like how almost everything that I'm watching, especially in this second one, is just not real. It kind of makes it hard for me to get invested into the story they're trying to tell when like most of it's not even happening. And without getting into any spoilers, this movie kind of uses that to cheat with its script to get its ending that it desires. And while it is an awesome ending, I do have to call it where I see it. But overall, Smile 2 surprised me in the best way possible this year. Coming in at number 4, we got Rebel Ridge. And like with most streaming movies, especially Netflix movies, I didn't know this thing was coming out until a week before its release. I saw half of a trailer for it, thought it was showing too much, and I kind of just cut it off. All I knew about it going in is that it was kind of marketed as an action movie, and it had a guy named Aaron Pierre that I did not know who he was at the time. But after watching this, not only do I now know who Aaron Pierre is, I think this movie is just his audition tape to play Jon Stewart. So this movie will always have a special place in my heart because of that. And even though I do think this movie is mismarketed because it's not really an action movie, it's more of just like a crime thriller, I really do think that this is a well done Netflix movie that I actually will rewatch in the future. I also really enjoyed how our main character uses non-lethal force to fight the police officers in this movie. It just added a little extra tension to the fight scenes because he couldn't just take them out quickly and kill them, but he had to disarm them, knock them to the ground, or knock them unconscious. I just really like the way that was handled, and that shot with him with the shotgun where he like unloads all the shells and then like throws it at him, bro, like that was peak. Overall, I think this is a really solid Netflix movie that you can just kick back and watch on a Friday night. Coming in at number 3, we have Transformers 1. And just like I was mentioning earlier with Rebel Ridge with the mismarketing, I think Transformers 1 is the biggest case of 2024 when it comes to mismarketing your movie. Because I don't know if y'all remember, but the first trailer for Transformers 1 was terrible. And I honestly don't feel like I'm exaggerating that because there were a ton of people that just wrote off this movie immediately after that trailer and didn't even watch the second or third ones. I mean, hell, they didn't even come watch the movie in theaters because it kind of bombed at the box office. I'm still really holding out hope for this movie to get a sequel because I thought that this was a fantastic Transformers movie, and it low-key might be my favorite, but I might have nostalgia goggles for that first Transformers movie, not gonna lie. I never thought that I would even consider liking an animated Transformers movie over the live-action ones, but here we are. I think the relationship between Optimus Prime and Megatron and how they build that relationship throughout the movie was just really well done. I think the voice actors' performances throughout were also a standout, especially Chris Hemsworth as he transitions from Orion Pax to Optimus Prime. Once I got to the end, honestly wouldn't mind Chris Hemsworth taking over as the main Optimus Prime voice after Peter Cullen can't do it anymore. Brian Tyree Henry going from D16 to Megatron was also a really cool one, even though I feel like his was a little more sudden than gradual. Keegan-Michael Key is hilarious as Bumblebee. Overall, Transformers 1 was just a really good Transformers movie that just is never going to be seen by most people. Maybe we'll get a sequel 5 years down the line or so, but it's really looking unlikely, and it's so disappointing because the stuff they set up at the end of this movie, I'm really excited for. But coming in at number 2, we got The First Omen, and this was at the number 1 spot for literally most of the year because I had not seen any of the Omen movies before March of last year. And I watched the very first Omen movie, not the first Omen. It's a really confusing title. title, gonna be honest. But I watched the first Omen movie in around March to prepare for this one, and I really enjoyed it. I understand why it's a classic, but I wouldn't say it's one of my all-time favorites because I don't have that nostalgia for it. So going into this movie, I was like, okay, so we're getting a prequel to a classic that doesn't really need to be made. Normally, this is just a setup for disaster with horror movies. Well, that's definitely not the case here, because the first Omen just has so much sauce. And if I'm being honest, because I don't have that nostalgia chord with the Omen, the first Omen is probably going to be my preferred version of this story. And I can see myself rewatching this more and more as time goes on. I mean, I did end up watching it towards the end of last year because I wanted to show my girlfriend this movie, and we both don't like nun horror movies, so she was against it, but I had to beg her to watch it, and she actually enjoyed it. Also, I want to give a shout out to Nell Tiger Free because she has an amazing physical performance in this movie. There's like one scene in particular where she's like approaching a church, and she like does this like body maneuver like this, and I was just like freaked out in the best ways possible. Probably one of my favorite horror performances of this year. Ralph Ineson plays a great Father Brennan, and I believed him to be the prequel version of the character, even though his voice is too damn deep to play that character. But coming in at number one for my most surprising movies of 2024, I got Wicked. If you told me at the beginning of 2024 that Wicked was going to be one of my favorite movies of the year, I would have called you a madman. I would have called you loony. I would have called you crazy. But this movie surprised me so much because I honestly was going to skip this one, but the reviews for this movie were so good, and a lot of male creators were coming out saying how much they liked it, and I was like, okay, I mean, like I'm comfortable in my masculinity enough to go watch Wicked by myself. My girlfriend's not really a musical person, so she didn't want to go watch it with me. So on top of the fact that I was not going to go watch this movie, I watched it by myself, and it was great. I think the songs of this movie are really catchy and great. Like Defying Gravity, like I had never heard like the play version of that, and I heard it for the first time in the movie, and I literally got goosebumps in that final scene of the movie, and honestly, I didn't think this movie was capable of doing that to me. I think Cynthia Erivo does a great job as Elphaba, and her singing voice is just top tier for the songs that she's tasked with. Ariana Grande I already knew was going to be great in this going into it, just with her music background, and I always enjoyed her in Victorious, so like her acting background's not the best, but I enjoy her in things. She almost adds like this extra layer to Glinda that I didn't think I was going to be able to fill, and she's actually a kind of a complex character, so I enjoyed having a character that you're supposed to not really like that much, but you end up kind of liking them towards the end of the movie. And then there's also a moment where you're not sure if liking them is the right choice. I really like the way the story is structured and written, and I don't know if I prefaced this, but I have not watched the play or anything. This is the only exposure that I have to Wicked, like, at all. I think Jeff Goldblum was a great choice for Oz. Michelle Yeoh does great in her role, just like she does in everything. But y'all get the idea. This cast was stacked. The production design was amazing. The songs were great. I'm not ashamed to say that Wicked is one of my favorite movies of this year, and it is definitely my most surprising one.
You're a fucking disappointment.
But now transitioning into my top 5 most disappointing movies of 2024. Starting out at number 5, I have The Substance. And I can already feel the comments yelling at me right now. Let me explain. I would give a positive review to this movie. I really would. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, which is like a 7 out of 10. And I really was digging this movie for like a majority of the runtime. I would say until the last 20 minutes start, 15 to 20 minutes give or take, I was really vibing with it. But then that last 15 to 20 minutes happens and it just ruins most of what I enjoyed about the movie, because I think Demi Moore was fantastic in this role, and I think she deserves all the award praise that she's gonna get and that she has got with her Golden Globe win. I think Margaret Qualley as Sue does great as well. I really like the rules that were set in place for The Substance, and I think they were pretty consistent throughout most of the runtime. The concept alone for this movie was pretty genius in my opinion. I'm not gonna attempt to pronounce the director's name because I don't want to butcher it, but I feel like she really put a great spotlight on the body dysmorphia issues of the entertainment industry, and I really do appreciate that messaging. The camera work was really great in this movie, and it was probably the biggest standout of the movie for me. Was the cinematography was just really well done. There were some shots where you kind of felt uncomfortable, like being really close to people while eating, for example. And with all these great things that I'm listing, you're probably wondering, why is it on your most disappointing? I was gonna give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. I had it set in my head until those last 20 minutes started. I was like, this is gonna be one of my favorites of the year. Then the last 20 minutes happened, and I was was like, what the hell are we doing? And I feel like this is the second time this year that I've had a horror movie not stick the landing in the ending, and it almost ruined the entire experience for me. And that first experience was Longlegs. And I think with my personal movie taste, I think the way a movie ends is really important for rewatchability and me wanting to get to that destination point every time I throw the movie back on. And I will probably never rewatch this movie again because of how bad I think the ending is. I do want to give one more shout out to the practical effects of this movie because they are really well done, especially by the time you get to that bodysuit at the end. That is the one thing about the finale I enjoy, is that practical looking suit. But overall, I think The Substance is a good movie, but it got hyped up to be this like masterpiece for me. But that's why it's at number 5 and not number 1 on this specific list. And coming in at number 4, I know a lot of people are going to get mad at me for this one, but Challengers. Just please hold your tomatoes in your hand before you start throwing them at me. Like, hear me out first. I wouldn't give this movie as positive of a rating as The Substance. I think The Substance is a better movie, but I do think this is a very well-made movie. The cinematography's great. The score is a good score, but we're going to hold that point until later. The performances are good. Just from a technicality standpoint, this movie is really well made. But from a story level and what I want out of a movie, all of these characters in this movie are unlikable. Every single character, I hate them. Maybe I wouldn't say hate for all of them, because Art by the end of the movie kind of was winning me over. Just with how bad he was getting screwed over by the end of the movie, I felt bad for him. And I get it is the point that all these characters are supposed to be unlikable, but when I have nothing to latch on to in a movie, like with characters, it does kind of bother me. Like, I was hoping for that one character where I was like, you know what? This is going to be the character that like I latch on into the movie, and it just never happened. But with all that being said, I will say that the last 10 to 15 minutes of this movie are fantastic. That ending of the movie almost saved it for me if I didn't dislike the first like 2 hours as much as I did. And the point that I brought up earlier about the score that I wanted to bring up later is that while this is a great score, and I think the awards that it's winning is great, I think it's a very unique score, especially with last year, but how this score is used in the movie is so annoying. It's like people will be talking, I'm trying to listen to the dialogue, and I just hear dun, 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 the whole time while people are talking. It was actually making me mad throughout the movie. And I'm sitting here trying to listen to these characters talk and trying to get like their motivations for things, and I can't fucking hear them because of the score. Now, I do think the score is used best in those last 20 minutes of the movie and during like the tennis matches in general. But when it's used during the dialogue scenes and every other scene after that, the score gets so tiring by the end of the movie, it cheapens those last 15 minutes for me. I will probably not rewatch this movie again as like a whole, but those last 20 minutes, I'll watch that again. I'll pull that up on YouTube in a heartbeat and watch that last scene and go on about my day. But again, if y'all enjoyed this movie, that's great. I think that's awesome. Just me personally, this movie disappointed me so much. And the reason why it's on this list is because it got hyped up to here, and I felt about like right here in the middle. I feel like a lot of people are going to take me as feeling right here. I do want to emphasize that I do not think this is a bad movie, but I just don't think it's as great as other people are saying it is. But coming in at number 3, sadly, I have Maxine. And it really sucks to have Maxine on this list because it was tied for first with Terrifier 3 for my most anticipated horror movies of last year. And one of those movies really like met and exceeded my expectations, and then you have Maxine. I don't think Maxine's a bad movie. I would give this movie a 3.5 out of 5, just like with The Substance, but I don't think Maxine has a lot of rewatchability. And I say that because I did rewatch this movie in theaters, taking my girlfriend to see it after I showed her X and Pearl, which I had already seen X when it came out, and I loved it. And I watched Pearl for the first time with her, and I love that movie too. But the thing about Maxine is that it's got some really good stuff in this movie. I love the different take on the 80s with it being more grimy instead of like glitzy, like most iterations of the 80s recently have been. And I think Mia Goth, while not being her best performance as this character, she does ooze charisma in this movie. But honestly, I think the main thing that holds me back on this film is just how predictable it is. Because I remember watching it for the first time with a friend of mine, and the whole time we're in the movie, we're like whispering to each other like, oh yeah, like I think it could be this guy. Oh, like, oh, what if they like connect it to Pearl in a way? Like, that'd be kind of cool. And then it just ends up being the person who it is. I think that was just the most lazy and predictable way they could have went with this story. So basically, I just think this movie doesn't pack the punch that X had, especially with that being my most surprising movie of 2022 and being probably my favorite horror movie that's come out in this decade. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. That's just off the dome. And the punch that Pearl packed with it being such a wildly different movie from X, and Mia Goth basically just getting to act her ass off for like 2 hours. Overall, I like Maxine, and I do think overall as a trilogy, it is a great horror trilogy. I just think Maxine is that weakest link, and I was hoping for it to be the best one, or at least tied for first for me. But coming in at number 2, we got M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. And to be honest, I think this might be one of the most disappointing movies just in comparison to its trailer. We all saw that trailer at the beginning of last year, and I don't know about y'all, but that shit had me pumped. I was thinking, man, M. Night might be back with this one. This might be his one good movie he makes every like 5 movies. And it's feeding into the resurgence of Josh Hartnett. But when I watched this movie, I actually didn't watch it in theaters. I watched it when it came out on streaming. And I feel like this movie just gets so ridiculous to a point with this script, it's like laughable. Because I honestly don't know if this movie was supposed to be like a commentary on white privilege or not, but it gets to a point where Josh Hartnett is just doing whatever the fuck he wants for the entire runtime. And even got to a point of just predictability, because like my girlfriend right beside me, like she was just predicting the movie back to back to back. It was just insane. Like she was on a roll. And I feel like if a movie is getting that silly and predictable, you lose interest, and the movie also just treats you like you're stupid. And like I was mentioning with Smile 2 cheating with its script, I don't think that movie is nearly as offensive with its cheating as the level of cheating that Trap does with its script. This movie literally just has to make dumb characters for the plot to happen. So overall, I wouldn't recommend Trap to really anybody, and it disappointed me so much after how hyped I was going into it. But coming in at number 1, we got Strangers Chapter 1. And Strangers Chapter 1 is a case of a remake that remakes the original movie to a T, but does everything worse. Like, I'm honestly not that big of a fan of the original movie. I think it's a pretty good horror movie, but it's not like an all-time favorite of mine. But I have a friend that is his favorite or like top 3 favorite horror movies ever. This movie pissed him off. He was telling me about it because he watched it before me. I didn't think this movie was going to make me as mad as it did because I don't have that much of attachment to the Strangers franchise. But boy, was I wrong. This movie made me so mad of just how lazy it was. The fact that they made 3 movies back to back, like they filmed all 3 of these, they just haven't released the second one and the third one yet. I just think that this film was a disaster. And on top of that, in my showing for this movie, there was a whole family that brought in their baby and it was crying the whole time during the showing. So on top of my bad movie I had to watch, I had a terrible theater experience to go with it. So I think this movie would just forever be disappointing me, because I was really intrigued by the fact that they filmed all 3 of these movies back to back, and that it seemed like Lionsgate was really confident in the product they had with the Strangers movies. But they can keep those other 2 Strangers movies. I'll watch them for like review purposes, but that is it. I just want to stop talking about this movie now. So let's segue into my top 10 best movies of 2024.
Yeah, it's good. No, it's not just good, it's better. It's the fucking best.
Coming in at number 10, I have Abigail. And this movie was just a fun time, man. I think the cast is really great. I think the kills were awesome. I really like what Radio Silence does with their horror movies. Not the biggest fan of their Scream movies. I think they're good. But I actually did visit Ready or Not after I watched Abigail because I had never seen it. And I enjoyed Ready or Not even more than Abigail. So far, they have a good track record with me. But Abigail specifically, it has my favorite movie line of the year with
Sammy, those are fucking onions.
I don't think I've laughed harder at a line this year than that. Dan Stevens delivered that shit perfectly. I think the little girl's performance as Abigail is really great. I think specifically she did a good job with like the taunting. By the time like she turns into Abigail, I feel like that's when it kickstarts her whole performance. But even in the part of the movie when they don't really know what she is, she does a good job with like playing her performance down a little bit. Melissa Barrera is really great in this movie, and I think she's been on a run since Scream 6 for me, because I wasn't a really big fan of her in Scream 5, but in 6 she had a really big step up in performance. And then in Abigail, like I really enjoyed her in this movie. So I hope Melissa Barrera can stay on the run that she's been on. Dan Stevens, like I was mentioning earlier, he has some hilarious lines in this movie. I really like his performance in the first 2/3 of the movie, I want to say. And then it just kicks up to 10 at the final act of the movie too. I also want to mention Kevin Durand. He had 2 movies this year that I really enjoyed him in. So this cast did a really good job. I can't praise the cast enough for Abigail. I think they elevate this movie a lot with it being an isolation horror movie that Radio Silence likes to do. And I could see this being one of my mainstay movies for years to come. I really enjoyed Abigail. The only thing that I'm really mixed on in this movie is a scene towards the end of the movie where that one guy shows up. If you know, you know. Wasn't really vibing with him that much as the character he's supposed to be playing, especially when he's been built to the whole movie. I don't hate it as much as some of my friends do. I do have my criticisms with that, but I don't hate it. I just am kind of mixed on it. Coming at number 9, we got First Omen. I already talked about First Omen earlier, but it is at number 9 on my top 10. Great movie. This is my second recommendation to you to watch it. Coming at number 8 is Transformers Transformers 1. I already talked about this one earlier as well. Second recommendation for you to watch this one as well. And actually, please watch this one so it gets a sequel. Coming in at number 7, I have Nosferatu. And I haven't seen Robert Eggers' other films. I actually wanted to stay away from them going into Nosferatu, so I just had like a blank slate to go off of him as a director. But from what I've heard about him, he really does like to immerse you into these time periods and like period pieces he likes to do. But I have heard some like mixed things about his other movies. A lot of like my friends don't really like his other stuff. The main movie that I hear that most general audiences like by him is The Northman. But with Nosferatu having a clean slate going in, I really enjoyed this one. I do agree with the way he immerses you into this world. I really enjoyed how the film almost felt like black and white when it was at nighttime, even though the movie was shot in color. Specifically, that shot when Nicholas Hoult is going to Count Orlok's castle is just awe-inspiring. Like when I was looking at that shot, like I leaned over to my friend, I was like, holy shit. Lily Rose Depp, I have not seen her in anything else. I know she was in that Weekend show, The Idol, but I heard it was trash, so I never watched it. But she's great in this movie. I know it's a little bit of nepotism going on with her being in this, but I don't really care. She does a great physical performance, which if you heard my thoughts on First Omen earlier, you know that's big bonus points for me. I think she does a really good job of like feeding into this like temptation of Nosferatu, and I really enjoyed her performance. Nicholas Hoult is good in this movie, but it's like one of his more like forgettable performances for me. Willem Dafoe's character is funny as shit in this movie. He says this one line that he's referring to the morning, and he calls it the first crow of cock, and I think that's the only way I'll refer to the morning from now on. Aaron Taylor Johnson plays maybe the realest dude in this movie. Some of the stuff he was saying, I was like, you know what, he's wrong, but like I kind of agree with him a little bit. It was nice seeing Ralph Ineson in another horror movie. And the man himself, Bill Skarsgård as Nosferatu, or Count Orlok, whatever you want to call him, he does amazing in this performance, and I think it is my favorite Bill Skarsgård performance to date, even over his Pennywise performance. I just think he did a great job with the voice and just making you feel his presence on screen at all times. And I think his performance is so good that it made me not mind the mustache on him, not gonna lie. Because when I first saw that, I almost started laughing because I was like, there is no way they just gave Nosferatu a mustache. But by the end of the movie, I didn't mind it. I forgot it was there. But that's what's so good about Bill Skarsgård. He can just disappear into these roles, and I want to see more of it, man. Like, give me more Bill Skarsgård performances where I honestly don't see him. He just disappears into it. The only negative I really have with this movie is that it's too long, and I feel like it could have been trimmed up a little bit, and it would just be a better movie for it. But overall, I really enjoyed Nosferatu for the most part. It's my number 7 of the year, and I will definitely be checking out Robert Eggers' others movies. But coming in at number 6, we got Wicked, and I already spoke about Wicked earlier, so this is my second recommendation for you to watch it, even though you've probably watched it already. Now, entering the top 5, I have Furiosa, and I actually just watched Furiosa like a few days ago because I just missed it earlier in the year. Yes, I am one of the people that didn't go watch it in theaters. Another reason for you to throw tomatoes at me, I'm sorry. But I actually have a pretty good reason for not going to see Furiosa in theaters. I'm just not a big fan of the Mad Max like style or universe. I watched Fury Road like in preparation to plan to watch this in theaters, and Fury Road just kind of disappointed me a little bit, like with how much people hype it up. It just felt like great, phenomenal action. Like, let me get that out of the way. Like, Fury Road has amazing action and even good performances. But the reason why I say like Fury Road is like kind of disappointing for me, it just doesn't really have a story going on. Like, it just feels like I'm watching a bunch of stuff happen that doesn't really mean anything. And I might be in due for a rewatch. I was a little tipsy when I watched Fury Road, so. But getting back to Furiosa, I didn't have like a lot of like expectations going into Furiosa, but I ended up really enjoying it. I think Anya Taylor-Joy plays a great young Furiosa. I think this movie gives a lot of context and meaning to a lot of the stuff that happens in Fury Road. I think I've actually would have preferred if we got this movie first and then got Fury Road. I think Fury Road would be a better movie in my opinion for it. Part of the reason I even want to watch Fury Road again is because of this movie. I just really enjoy the revenge tale. Like, that's just one of my favorite types of movies. Chris Hemsworth does a really good job with his performance, and it's a very different type of performance than he usually does. And I need Chris Hemsworth to do more movies like this, where he's actually getting to show his acting range. I thought the action was like right on par with the stuff in Fury Road, even though there's not as much of it as there is in Fury Road. Overall, Furiosa really impressed me, and if we do get another Mad Max movie, I mean, I'm gonna be there day one now. So I'm sorry for being a very minute reason to why this movie bombed. But coming in at number 4, I got Alien Romulus. And Alien Romulus got a lot of mixed reactions when it first came out, of it being like non-original. A lot of people were compared to the kind of like Force Awakens. So like going into this movie after seeing some of the first reactions, reactions, I was like, is it gonna do like the nostalgia bait thing? And it did, but not to the degree I think people were like making it out to be. I would say that it is my only mixed thing. I wouldn't say a negative, but I am mixed on it because some of the lines I think and some of the callbacks are decent and good, and I was like, okay, like that's pretty cool. That's a good callback. And then you have the line where he like quotes Ripley, and I'm like, you know, like that was the only time in the movie I feel like I was like, I kind of cringed. But everything else about this movie was fucking awesome to me. I think that zero gravity scene is like top 5 scenes of the year for me. I really enjoyed how this movie basically took the best stuff from Alien, that like isolated feel, almost grungy look to it, to this like space station, and took the best elements from Aliens with some of the action and the multiple xenomorphs and everything. I really enjoyed how it fused the two elements together, and I think if you watch like Alien Romulus, and Aliens, you have yourself a perfect trilogy of just quality. And I do plan to do that binge watch pretty soon because like I've been craving for some Alien Romulus again, and I just bought the steelbook actually. I thought the face huggers in this movie were terrifying, and they were a much needed return. I love how a lot of the marketing focused on it. I mean, the poster that I'm looking at on my letterbox right now literally has the face hugger on her face. Great job with the face huggers. And the big elephant in the room, kind of literally, the third act of this movie, or the third act part B is as I like to call it, I really like the swing that it took. And I know a lot of people don't like when this franchise takes swings, but then also complain that it's not taking any swings with the nostalgia stuff. I do think it's a little hypocritical by a lot of people that were reviewing this movie, but I enjoy it. It basically did the thing that Alien Resurrection, I think is the fourth one, what it did in that third act of the movie that I hated in that movie, and it made it good. And I like when you can take elements from all movies in the franchise and still make it good. I have heard that it also takes elements from Prometheus and Covenant. I have not watched those movies yet. I need to watch them, I know. But back to Alien Romulus, that like final set of scenes with the new thing that they do is just nightmare fuel. I watched it with a group of friends, and there was one of my friends, if he's probably watching this video right now, but like the whole time he just kept going, oh God, oh God, oh God. It was so funny. And he's not a really big horror movie fan, so I enjoyed that very much as someone who is a horror movie fan, getting to see one of my friends react like that to something. But I was even reacting too, and not a lot of horror movie stuff does that for me. So overall, I think Alien Romulus is a great Alien movie, and I think if you want to like have a good Alien trilogy to watch, and honestly don't watch any further than that, watch Alien, Alien Romulus, and Aliens. Just watch that as a trilogy, and you can be done with the Alien franchise, at least in my opinion. Even though Alien Resurrection has some dumb fun. There, I said it. But coming in at number 3, we got Deadpool and Wolverine. And this movie was just great on all levels in terms of just like a blockbuster. And while this isn't my favorite Deadpool movie, I still think the first one holds a special place in my heart. Also, fun fact about the first one, it was actually one of my first rated R movies I watched in theaters. But Deadpool and Wolverine, it's a really close second for me in terms of the Deadpool movies. I thought it was a significant improvement over Deadpool 2. I think adding Hugh Jackman into the mist just added so much more like emotions and compared to the second one that the second one was trying to accomplish, but I feel like Hugh Jackman just has such a good screen presence and gravitas to him. Even that scene in the car where he's like yelling at Deadpool and just blows up, and it became a meme for the longest of like when your dad yells at you. But that scene in particular just added so much to the movie, and even to the point when you get to the end and you get like the big emotional reveals and his big character moment, you believe it and you buy into it, or at least I know I did, even though it's supposed to be a dumb Marvel movie, as a lot of people would like to say. And I know that's why a lot of people don't rank this movie highly this year, is because they think it's just like nostalgia bait, and I just think that's false. I think this movie has a lot of merit behind it. The cameos that you do get for the nostalgia stuff are great. Most of them were unexpected. As someone who follows like a lot of scoopers on Twitter and stuff, sometimes I know a little too much about Marvel movies than I should going into them. But with this movie, I had no idea about some of these cameos, and when I was seeing them, it was like the first time in a while where I was so surprised and hyped at the same time, and it made me feel like a kid again. So Deadpool and Wolverine, even though it's this R-rated like adult comedy superhero movie, it made me feel like a kid again, and I think that's a testament to just how great this movie is and how big of a moment it was in 2024, because a lot of people don't give it credit. It's a $1 billion R-rated movie, and it's the highest grossing R-rated movie ever forever, and it probably will stay that way for a very long time. So big kudos to Deadpool and Wolverine. Honestly, I hope we get this team up again someday, even though I don't think it's gonna happen, at least in like a movie like this. I think that'll probably be safe for an Avengers movie. I want to see Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds get back together again and deliver us some more cinema. But coming in at number 2, we got Dune Part 2, and this was my number 1 movie for a majority of 2024 because it was just miles ahead of the competition when it came out, in my opinion. Like, it was an event on TikTok. I remember just all the memes. This movie was a big moment for 2024, but also being a damn good sci-fi movie, and I haven't seen a movie this epic in so long, probably since Avengers Endgame. And I think we need more movies like Dune Part 2 in cinemas. That's why Dune Messiah is just like really high up there for me, anticipation. I think for 2026 or 2027, can't remember which year that's coming out. It like changes every day, but pretty sure it's 2026. So when that movie comes out, when that year comes around, that's gonna be my most anticipated movie of that year, or at least top 3, just with how much Dune Part 2 really sold me on this franchise. Because the first Dune movie, I really liked it, but it was mad boring. Let's be honest here. At least for me, I thought that movie was a drag until about the 3rd act, and then, you know, stuff starts happening, and then they ended it right when stuff was about to get good. And now I know what I waited 3 years for, the good stuff. And that's basically all Dune Part 2 is the good stuff that was missing from the first movie. And I think they split it at a perfect point for me to enjoy Dune Part 2 significantly more than the first Dune movie. Overall, Dune Part 2, one of the best movies I've seen in the decade, and one of the best movies of 2024. But coming in at number 1, I have The Wild Robot. And this movie hit so many emotional chords for me. It was funny, it was sad, it was endearing. I'm not a parent or anything, but like the parental stuff in this movie, I think a lot of people could connect with that do have kids. I just think The Wild Robot is a beautiful movie that DreamWorks put out. And I've been curious to go check out the book now, because like I'm curious what happens in the Wild Robot 2 that they're trying to make. And I didn't have many expectations going into this movie. Like, I knew I would probably enjoy it just because I'm a dude that enjoys a good animated movie, and a movie that hits me in my feels, and the trailer was like really good, and I was like, okay, so I'll probably enjoy this. But to be my number 1 of the year, I had to sit on that for a little bit. I really had to like fight myself and be like, no, Dune is the best movie this year. But finally, about like a couple months ago, I was like, you know what? The Wild Robot has been on my mind since its release. Took my girlfriend to go see it. She really enjoyed it as well. Not as much as I did, but it has just been on my mind. I'm gonna revisit this movie. I'm actually planning to order this movie on 4K very soon, because Amazon's got a deal going for it. But I just think the cast is good in this movie. Like, Lupita Nyong'o does great as Roz. Her performance evolves throughout the movie. I really like when voice performances do that. If you can't tell from my Transformers 1 thoughts, I really enjoyed how it just like evolved throughout the film. Pedro Pascal is Fink. I did not know it was Pedro Pascal until the credits rolled, so great voice performance on his part. I do think everybody else in the cast does a great job as well. I think the animation is beautiful, especially like when the fire is hitting the forest. It was really beautiful. The scenes where Bright Bill is learning to fly, that whole like montage with the song and everything, and how it swells up your emotions towards the end of it. I think that like scene alone is like one of my favorite scenes of the year. Just the simple scene towards the end where like they're in the ship, they say the line that you've been wanting them to say for the whole movie, and it's like silent, there's no music, and it just hit me. It hit me right in the feels, right where I needed it. And I just can't recommend this movie enough. And I like that it's my number 1 because it's such an easy movie to recommend, because it's a family film. You can recommend it to your mom, your dad, your cousins. You could recommend this movie to pretty much anybody, and they'll probably like it. At least I think they will. But that rounds out my best movies of 2024 with Wild Robot at number 1.
Well, hate.
Loathe entirely.
But now to get to my top 5 worst movies of 2024, and I'm just gonna kind of fly through these because I don't want to be too negative, but I gotta give credit where credit's due of how bad some of these movies are. But coming in at number 5, I got Madam Web, and a lot of people would have this way more down than me, but the reason why I have this at number 5 is because I watched this with a group of friends in an empty theater, and it was one of the funniest times I've ever been in a movie. We were roasting this movie bar for bar, joke for joke. It was fantastic. One of my favorite movie theater experiences I've ever had. And it's all credited to this movie right here and how bad this movie is with the ADR, the reshoots, taking stuff out of the movie. This movie is just terrible, but it's so good at the same time. So the reason why it's at number 5 is because I think this movie, I would actually rewatch it, getting drunk with some friends and just roasting the fuck out of it. Coming in at number 4, I got Imaginary. I honestly just want to imagine that this movie never happened, but I can't do that. I just really think this concept was just an L from the beginning. Blumhouse kind of just makes horror movies about anything, and their ratio as of recent, especially with 2024, just has been not very good. I think the last Blumhouse movie that I genuinely enjoyed, besides Speak No Evil, I did enjoy Speak No Evil a little bit last year, but I think the last movie before that I really enjoyed was Megan or Black Phone. It was one of those. But if we want to talk about Blumhouse movies that I've actually loved, that's an even different story. So I really need Blumhouse to kind of wake up and stop giving me so much slop, because eventually I might just stop watching them. This statement also just gets paired with my next placement, and that's Night Swim. Night Swim is literally a horror movie about a pool. I don't even think there's any like kills in this movie. I'm pretty sure people just choke and drown on air. Pretty sure that's most of the compelling moments in this movie, or supposed to be compelling moments, are just people drowning on thin air. Next movie. Coming in at number 2, I have The Watchers. And this movie, I respect M. Night Shyamalan's game with the nepotism he's doing with his daughters right now. Like, you know, Trap. I didn't even mention this earlier with Trap. He's like putting a platform out, one of his daughter's singing careers, and then now we're getting a directorial feature from one of his daughters as well. And I'm gonna be honest, if I was a dad in M. Night Shyamalan's position, I'd do the same thing. But The Watchers is a bad movie, and I'm not gonna shy from it, because this movie was one of the only ones this year that almost put me to sleep. I'm pretty sure I drifted off for about 5 to 10 seconds, and I never do that during movies. It's very uncommon for me to fall asleep during a movie. But I just think this movie got really ridiculous towards the end with like what was actually behind what was going on. And I actually was pretty intrigued by the trailer for this one, so that's why I ended up watching it anyway. But I just was not a fan where this movie went. But coming in at number 1, I have The Strangers Chapter 1. Fuck this movie. It's terrible. I already spoke about it earlier, but it is my worst movie of 2024. Shout out to Michael, who hates this movie even more than me, even though we both have it as our worst movie of 2024. But that's gonna do it for my best and worst movies of 2024. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like on it. It really helps out the algorithm a lot. Share the video with a friend if you think they would enjoy it as well. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you want to see more movie content like this. I'm really trying to put my head down and grind out some more videos for you guys for 2025. Make sure to comment your list for the year down below. I'd really like to hear what y'all think. Or just to tell me how wrong my opinion is. That's cool too. But as always, guys, it's been Noezone. Peace.